What's up, bikers? Episode 184. I'm super stoked about this one. We're going to have Derek Teel from Dialed Health on. And those of you guys that may or may not remember, a few months ago or a while ago, I was talking about a friend of mine that got hit by a car while doing a road ride and was fighting for his life. I was asking for people to potentially make some donations to the cause. And this is the guy. So we're going to talk about what happened and what else is going on in his life. So it'll be a fun one. Before we get started, I want to real quick give a quick shout out to some of my sponsors. If you guys don't already know, Ari Bikes is the bike company that used to be called Fazari, but now they're Ari, and they're sponsoring this tubby guy that's that's making YouTube videos. So I wanted to mention I picked up this Wasatch Peak. I don't even know how to say it. Maybe I should call him up and be like, hey, can you school me? Anyways, I got this hardtail. Wow, I don't know if you guys can hear the sirens, but there's some shit going on outside. Anyways, I got this hardtail for $8.99, same price as you guys, dude. Basically, even though I got a sponsorship with them, I wanted to buy a bike and see kind of like what their process was like. So out the door, this thing was like $1,000, man. And I was blown away by the whole process. Honestly, down to them like texting me like, hey, we're putting in a box today, that kind of stuff. Like, it blew me away. They called me a couple days later to like make sure everything that I put on the website was right. So give them a look. And if you're watching on YouTube or somewhere, I guess YouTube's the only place that you'd be able to add a comment. And you have an idea of some hardtail content that I should do with this thing, leave me a message or content, shoot me a DM, and yeah, maybe I'll do it. Anyways, aside from that, Tasco MTB has been a long time friend of mine, and I've been wearing his stuff for a long time. Last year, after wearing his stuff all year, I decided to like make it a little bit more official. So they're sponsoring the channel as well. And I was on their website yesterday and I noticed that they have this sale page, and you can go there, just go to the main page and hit the sale. And basically there's some pretty good deals on here though. Some Lone Star Texas gloves for $20. These checkered ones, the Ridgeline gloves, the Checkmate yellow, down to 24. And if you want to save some more money, put in code B1KER and that's how it works. Also, last thing, Cali Protectives has been a longtime supporter of the channel. And if you're a Star Wars fan, you should check this out. They have this Invader 2.0. It's a full face helmet, but it's like, think of it as like an XC full face helmet. Basically, it gives you the protection of your face. So like any kind of like regular enduro kind of XC riding where you're like, man, I don't want to knock my teeth out. Like, this is the one, because it's not as heavy as a full on like DH helmet, but it's super ventilated. So anyways, they have this Star Wars drop that they're doing tomorrow. This paint scheme is kind of makes it look like one of the Star Wars helmets. So there's a blue and white and black and a red and white and black, and they're on pre-order right now. And then tomorrow they're live. So this is a limited run. Anyways, if you want to save some money there, B1 Cali 30, you'll save 30%. So go ahead and check them out. All right, let's bring Derek on. Let's talk about bikes. What's up, dude?
Yo, thanks for having me on.
Yeah, for sure, man. It's honestly, I'm super stoked to talk to you. I mean, like bottom line is, you know, how long ago was this this accident happened?
Just over 3 months.
3 months. Okay. I was thinking it was a couple months, but you know how guy time is. It could have been like a year ago.
Seriously. Well, the funniest comment I've gotten has been like, oh my gosh, time has gone by so fast. And I'm like, for you, I've been in the worst pain of my life the last 3 months. I mean, I'm grateful to be this far along, but I can't say that the time has flown by. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I'm just super stoked to talk to you, because 3 months ago, I wasn't sure if I was ever going to talk to you again. You know what I mean? Like that's like legitimately, it was a shock, dude. I mean, it was a shock to everybody, you know, and obviously for whatever reason, the story resonated with a lot of people, man. Like I was surprised when, I don't remember even how I saw it initially. I think one of my friends texted me and was like, hey, dude, I heard that Derek got in an accident. And then whatever, I saw some like MTB NorCal post, and I had posted something on my social, and that thing just took off. And it was like people that I didn't even know were like, "Hey, I just went and donated money." You know, like people that were clearly not followers. Like you clicked on their profile and they were like cats. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't know what happened, but that was really rad, dude. That to see the like community come together like that. But
Dude,
yeah,
that was overwhelming in the best possible way. It
yeah,
was
I
really
can't
strange for me too because it was almost 3 days. I was so drugged up. I had multiple days of surgeries
Mm-hmm.
that I thought I was unconscious the whole time. Apparently, I was a little bit responsive.
Mm-hmm.
But January 30th, I got hit. February 2nd is when I actually came to and was talking to people and asking what
Mm-hmm.
day it was and that whole thing. And so to see what had happened, in those few days while I
Mm-hmm.
was, basically just getting operated on
Yeah.
was really strange because I've always relied so heavily on my own platform and reach to get
Uh-huh.
any message out there. So to
Yeah.
see things spread through text, through random posts here, there, everywhere, seeing the cycling community come together because, I have friends that are from the downhill side of the industry and
Mm-hmm.
enduro. I have a lot of friends more currently in road and gravel and like the endurance side. So to see everyone come together to support and also get people that just love me and my family involved who
Mm-hmm.
don't ride at all
Yeah.
was so cool. And that really showed at the fundraiser event that MTB NorCal put on
Yeah.
because we had friends and family there that just brought their kids that don't ride and just
Yeah.
wanted to support. So it was insane. And it still is. I mean, I got a card yesterday from an uncle of mine just telling me to keep going. And he sent me
Yeah.
some money. And
Yeah.
it's funny to talk about the money thing because you don't ever want that to come off the wrong way, but
Yeah.
it helps so much because when you're concerned about your livelihood throughout this time, it makes such a difference. And
Yeah.
I'm so grateful for everything everybody did, man. It's just, like I said, overwhelming in the best possible way.
I'm sure for you, I'm gonna make an assumption of like what I know out of your character, but you're a person that really likes to give a lot to other people. So to be on the receiving end of somebody that's that type of person, it's usually even harder.
Hmm.
Do you agree? To be like
Like it's
receiving.
hard to accept.
Yeah, yeah,
um, yeah, I think so. And it's funny too because there's even comments that people say that feel hard to accept,
yeah,
and it's almost weird to even say it like this, but I've had so many people say that I'm inspiring by pulling
yeah,
through this, and to me, I'm just doing my best to pull through it, and
yeah,
it's just it's funny because sometimes I wonder, I'm like, do I try and move at this speed just because it's so wrapped up in my business? But I think the reality is that I'd probably do it this way if it wasn't. It really feels like just who I am.
yeah,
So when someone says something like that, it's hard because I'm like, man, I'm just recovering, and I was in this weird situation. But I
yeah,
do see it in the best possible light, and even when I joke about someone saying, "Gosh, time's flown by," but it always comes from a good place,
yeah,
and
yeah,
so
100%.
that's cool. And actually, the the coolest thing about a lot of the financial donations is that they've gone to other friends in need too. Like there's been multiple things where someone sends me $1,000, right?
Hmm.
And then a friend gets hurt. Like I had a buddy get hurt in New Zealand at an enduro race, and literally, it was like I got this money in this one day, and then I found out about his accident, and it's just like straight his direction. And so
Yeah,
that's what's so cool about it too, is like you have an opportunity to give more. And I think because I had never been through such a traumatic experience, I've never spent so much time in the hospital. I didn't know how much people in that position need help. So to be
yeah,
able to take those resources from someone else and just to like push them to somewhere who needs it at this time just feels so
yeah.
cool. So it's been that part of it's been very full circle and rewarding. So it kind of, makes me feel like I'm helping out and not just like taking, you know?
Yeah, 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 totally. I mean, it's awesome that that it shows your character that you're still pushing, like paying it forward,
Mm,
even like whenever, like, obviously, like, you could just take that and not have any hard feelings on yourself. You know what I mean? Like, at the end of the day, the person's like trying to support you, you know, and it just goes to show like your character of who you are. And I think honestly, like, um through social media and seeing the posts that your mom and your wife made, like, it's very apparent that this is what who your family is. It's not like you're this like singular guy that's just like, you know, real stand up like that, and you're surrounded by all these other people that are the same way.
Oh yeah, and much better in those areas than I
Yeah.
am. You know, my mom is one of the most outgoing, fun, encouraging people you'll ever meet. I mean, she makes my energy level look like nothing. And on the flip side, my wife is one of the most grounded, content people I've ever met. And
Hmm.
so it does really bring me back to earth because uh, I don't know if a lot of people know this, but I have a tendency to be very type A. And I always joke with my wife, I'm like, gosh, if I never met you, if I wouldn't have had kids when I did, I would have turned into this type A single guy, like everything has to be in the perfect order, situated this, you know, and I would have been a total psycho that way. So I'm grateful to have that support system because it's balanced me out a lot. And honestly, I'm just so grateful to have had a good relationship with my family before this happened because I think I did take a lot of pride in the fact that I was very independent and self-reliant before this because I've had to be very scrappy over the years to just build up my business and make
Yeah.
certain transitions and, you know, get through these crazy ride challenges or whatever. But it's like no matter how fit you are, no matter how successful you are or can be or want to be, whatever, it's like in a split second that can all change.
Yeah.
And you can rely on people just to survive or just to go to the bathroom, you know, or
Yeah.
just to eat or anything. And I had weeks of that, you know, where I literally couldn't go to the bathroom by myself, which I'm actually surprised less people, no one really asked me how you poop with a torn colon and a broken femur and pelvis. That was a situation. But yeah, I'm happy to not be messing with that anymore.
Yeah, yeah, I can only imagine. I don't feel like we need to touch the base on that.
I don't know why I want to tell people. It was just a miracle. I remember being in this situation, being like, wow, this is what I'm going to remember. But anyways, we can move on.
That's hilarious. Um, yeah, yeah. There's all kinds of mental images. I'm like, I don't know which one to run with.
Sorry.
They're all bad.
Yeah, it's probably worse than whatever you have in your head. I promise
Oh,
you
I'm
that.
sure it is. There's not a doubt in my mind. So, like, people that aren't familiar with you, you have a background. You were a professional downhill racer for a amount of time. Do you want to give a little like bio of your the elevator pitch of who Derek Teel is?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So I grew up racing downhill, worked my way up to a pro UCI license, was competitive nationally, never racing World Cups or anything like that. But I rode for Yeti national team and had really great support. And as I was starting to question whether or not I wanted to really keep pursuing downhill, this is when I was about 19 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I started working with trainers and nutritionists and got really interested in that side of it, the coaching side, and learning more about the actual strength training components we were taking in and the nutrition. And so when I wanted to put a pause on racing, I just pursued that. And I ended up becoming a personal trainer, totally walked away from riding, which was very strange. And it was tough because I wasn't going to school because I was likely going to be a pro downhill racer. It wasn't like this far-fetched dream. It was right there. So
Right.
it was I was very confused and honestly just didn't know if I could be happy without doing that. But for some reason, I just felt drawn this direction. And so became a personal trainer, worked in the general fitness industry. And after a few years of that, I felt like I had some unfinished business. And this was really when Enduro was coming around in a big
Mm-hmm.
way. And I had actually sold my downhill bike and my dirt jumper and got a trail bike. And it was a Santa Cruz Nomad, and it had like that original gravity dropper post from like 2013 on it, maybe
Mm-hmm.
2012. It was pretty sick. And so started having fun with that. Got to a point where I'm like, man, I need to pursue this racing because it just feels like I didn't go out the way I wanted to. And so I put a time cap on it. I was like, all right, I'm already riding well. I have all these skills built up. If I can't have like a pro contract at the end of these 2 years, then I need to pursue just my personal training business because that's plenty of time barring injury with my history to be accomplished. And I got to the point where, I was a podium contender at all the Enduro races, winning TDS stages and riding with the best riders in the nation and some in the world. And it was cool because I got an opportunity to race and explore that whole side of the sport and do it in a way that conquered a lot of demons. Like I used to be a stress case when I was racing, anxiety, tons of worry. I never felt like I had good performances. It's just all over the place. And so I got really like when I got into Enduro, I wanted to have fun with it too. I remember telling myself, I'm like, dude, I want to enjoy racing. And I still got stressed here and there, but it was cool because I really enjoyed it. I rode very consistently, did well, made a ton of connections. But
what do you think made that change for you to like get rid of the anxiety and the like what was the deciding factor in that?
Just knowing that it doesn't help at all. Yeah. I think that's the biggest thing is that for me, when I got anxious for racing, I wouldn't eat. So then I got very weak and then I couldn't ride. And it was like this snowball effect. Like I couldn't focus. All these things would happen. And so I remember, and I think some age and some maturity also like probably helped too. It just being like, wow, okay, I'm going to do this. But there were these things that were obvious roadblocks for me that don't need to be. And so again, I'm not going to say I was perfect, but I really did enjoy it a lot more. And it was cool because with Enduro, I had more time to get to know my competitors. So I got to ride with them between transfers and talk with them. And a lot of them at this time knew I was a personal trainer full time. And so it was a very natural progression into creating strength training programs for Enduro racers. And so there was such a need for it. I remember thinking, dude, I just need to put out a program. And so
this is before the 2 years was up. You were like, I'm going to start this.
Pretty much. Yeah. It was like, I would say into the second year, I remember thinking like, wow, this is one of the best pros in the country. And they really don't know what they're doing for strength training. Yeah. And so it felt like a real need. And that was the first program I put out. And I remember when someone bought it at the time, I was so capped on what I could do for in-person sessions because it's just an hourly rate. I remember thinking like, wow, this is a way I could actually expand my business a little bit. And when I kind of had that reality check of, okay, I feel like I'm not going to get to that level to where, World Enduro is my future. And I needed to commit to my business. I didn't just clean cut it off. I still did a couple races a year, stayed in the industry, but I really did lean into the business. And it was awesome because, as I've changed as a rider and, gone more toward the endurance side, I've been able to kind of adapt the business that direction as well. So that's kind of how everything has gotten to the point it's at with Dialed Health. So it's awesome. Yeah.
So initially you were like kind of just doing a personal trainer thing. You open up your own gym and then you kind of see this opportunity to make videos for people to follow instead of doing more of the in-person stuff. Right.
Yeah. And I had the platform built right before COVID, which in hindsight was like the saving grace to everything. Cause it was a very, very small percentage of my income. And dude, at that time, I had a 1-year-old and my wife was pregnant with twins. And we go into COVID, and then 80% of my businesses, it was just it was crazy stressful. Yeah. But that was an opportunity that I really leaned into the online. And so by the time gyms were able to open again and all that stuff, I was already basically just a half mass, like half time working on the platform, building programs and recording stuff, and then half training people in person. So yeah, it was a nice progression because when you are coaching people in person, there's so many cues and barriers you understand from that process that if you just were Instagram guy, trainer, and then started launching programs, I don't know, I've never looked at them, but I imagine they suck because you wouldn't understand what people go through and the things that like stop people from getting started. So it was like this beautiful progression.
Yeah, I see what you're saying. So like if you're just a person that's like, hey, let me tell you how to do these workouts, but you don't have the experience with actual like training people in person, then maybe your workouts aren't actually catered to the way that like humans are, is what you're saying.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah, yeah.
it's easy to even understand the science behind building a
Yeah.
proper workout, and uh, there's an order of operations that's probably ideal for most athletes and just most
Mm,
people in general. And it's like, okay, perfect scenario. Someone has access to every piece of equipment. They have no injuries. That
mhm.
this is perfect for them. But the second
Yeah.
you introduce an injury, the second you introduce a tight schedule or limited equipment, all those real life factors really change what you can do as a trainer to actually program for somebody. And so it's
Yeah.
those variables that make a really huge difference. And there's little stuff too. I don't know if you've noticed it in workouts, but even if you have a workout that's very like, let's just say you have to get up and down off the ground, stand up, change this, move equipment between every movement. It just kills the flow. So there's these
Mhm.
little tricks you learn. You're like, oh wow, if I
Yeah.
could slowly get them to the ground and then just stand up once between a circuit, opposed to
Yeah.
on and off the ground or having to change equipment every
Yeah.
single time they do a
Yeah.
set, it's really going to improve the flow of their workout. So it's like there's all this science you want to follow, but there's also these real life principles that they really do make as much of a difference because at the end of the day, program adherence is the most important thing. Someone
Yeah.
getting the workout done and doing it consistently is the most important. So if
Yeah.
you can solve a hang up, even if it's not perfectly backed by science, maybe that sounds bad to somebody, but the reality is they're still probably going to get better results.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. I mean, I like usually kind of set kind of like three different exercises together.
Yeah.
And I kind of in my head, I try to make one of them something that I think is fun. Like
I like
as
that.
fun as like something can be. You know what I mean? Like for example, like I like doing like ball slams, right? Like I think they're
There
just
you go.
fun. And even though like I'm still like busting my ass when I'm doing it, it's just like it's more enjoyable to me than doing like lunges with a bunch of weight in my hands. You know what I mean? Or like
Yeah.
so it's like maybe if I'm doing like some lunges and I'll like also like kind of like pile things together. So it'll be like I'll be doing lunges, but at the same time I'm doing lunges, I'm like in between the lunge, I'm raising one leg and doing a curl with the dumbbells that I'm holding. Right. So it's like do all this, and then that's the set that I hate. And then it's
Right.
like maybe next I'm doing, whatever, something else. And then the ball slams at the end, and I'm like, oh, okay, well, like that was fun. It's like, but
I,
yeah, there's
yeah.
those things that you're talking about. Like you have to like make it work.
Mhm. Yeah, you really do. I kinda do the same thing with kettlebells. Those are my favorite. I can't wait to
Yeah.
get back to using them. I really miss it, but a lot of times I would end a workout with some kettlebell flows, just a little bit more
Yeah.
movement, because for one, it feels like it kinda ties everything together, and that's just my favorite thing to do. So it does feel
Yeah.
like a reward if there is a workout in there that you just don't
Yeah.
love. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and there's different things like that I do, like, that was just, like, the one that, like, came to mind quickest, but it's that same kinda thing where it's like, "Oh, this one, it's work." I mean, it still sucks, you know what I mean? It's like, it's still harder than sitting on the couch, that's for sure, but it's like, for whatever reason, I enjoy doing that more. So, you start like building this platform or whatever, but like at the core of like who you were initially or originally is like a mountain biker, right?
Yeah.
So how did there was a point in time that I saw you online go from being a mountain biker to being a road rider, and how did that happen?
It was training for enduro.
Uh-huh.
Seriously, the first enduro I did was it was one of the local North Star races. It was a
Hmm.
two-stage enduro, but one of the stages was savage. It was like 15 minutes and had this quarter mile fire road climb at the end. And I was so tired after this 3-hour block of racing. And this was after, dude, at this point, as an enduro rider, I had done 10K days as far as climbing goes with vert.
Hmm.
It's just different when you're racing, but it's also there's something about endurance when you don't stop
Hmm.
that is different. And so I realized because I was so smashed from this race that I needed to build a real base of endurance. I was like, I am way too tired for what I just did. And that's when I started getting out on the road bike and I actually started riding the trainer quite a bit. And so I think the first ride I did on the trainer was like 90 minutes, zone 2. So pretty low heart rate, but it didn't stop. And I remember being so smoked by the end of this ride. I realized I was like, that is a huge, I guess, downfall for me. It's like this low hanging fruit. So I started doing it. And as I mentioned earlier, I'm having kids, I'm running my business. And pretty soon I realized, I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so much easier to ride my road bike opposed to spending an entire day going up the hill to mountain bike. Or for instance, even for me, the closest trails are still a 20-minute drive. And so by the time you load up the car and like you always lie to yourself about how long it's going to take to do this process, but if it's 20 minutes drive, it's 10 minutes of loading, no matter how prepped your stuff is. And then it's doing it again when you get there and the process in reverse. And pretty soon your 3-hour time block you had really was like an hour to an hour and a half ride. Right.
Yeah. I totally just tell myself that the amount of time it takes me to drive there is the only amount of time that I need. Like I'm like, oh, it's 40 minutes to Auburn. Like I totally don't count packing the car up. I totally don't count like getting my shit out of the car when I get there. You know, like
totally.
It's like, oh yeah, 45 minutes. Maybe I give myself an extra 5 minutes, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah. And at that time I felt so pressed for time that I got to a point where I was like, gosh, I have 3 hours. I can roll out my front door and ride for like 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
You know, realistically. And so that became more and more appealing. And then it was just a funny progression because then I wasn't racing enduro as much. To be honest, I was not burnt out, but I had spent so many years doing it that it was kind of nice to have a change as well.
Yeah.
And also though, I got to point this out. The one TDS stage I won was after that year of being like, all right, I'm pulling the plug. I raced like 2 races that following year. One was TDS. Dude, I had 3-month-old twins. I had a 1.5-year-old. I'm running the business. I'm getting like 0 sleep. I mean, I was at the peak of almost going crazy from no sleep. But my fitness was so good because of all the road riding that I had been doing that I won the climby pedally stage at TDS. Right. And I remember just going nuts on it and being like, that was so rewarding because this work's been paying off and it just makes me enjoy the benefits of the endurance side that much more. Yeah. And so, I think it was just a combination of the direction my life was going with time and other obligations. And then also seeing the benefits of it and then just kind of having a change because the funny thing about that style of riding, I think the better you get, the more enjoyable it is. And I think mountain biking can be the same way, but when it gets easier to ride further and more comfortable and you start fueling better, you can pace yourself differently. You start riding in groups. It can be really fun. Like it was surprising me how much I was enjoying it. So after that, I noticed I really love to do bigger rides and climb a lot. And that's pretty much what gravel races are, these really big routes that and some of them you couldn't really ride unless it was in this format and put together and with, race directors and people blocking roads and stuff. So when you do go out to a gravel event, you end up riding these really, really sick routes that you probably couldn't ride otherwise. So it was like everything was spiraling to push me in that direction. And it's actually crazy right now. I don't even have a trail bike. I just have an XC bike for my mountain bike. Yeah. I hate to say that. I know everybody listening is hating it right now, but it's wild.
Yeah. I mean, I think, with cycling, you have stages of things that you do. And it's at the end of the day, it's all riding a bike, right? But I think that you do this like in general just to keep it interesting. Like there was a stage where there was a 6-month block that I only did night rides. Like really? it was like, and it was summertime. Like I could literally ride in the daytime if I wanted to, but I was like, man, this is so much fun. It's like a whole new thing, and then it's like, or I bought a hardtail and then I'm doing that, or it's like you said, I fell into road riding almost a very similar story where it was like initially I bought a single speed, and I was like, oh, I work in Davis. I live in Sacramento. I was like, I'll just ride to work. We have a shower at work, and it'll be like an extra, 2 hours of cardio a day. That'll just like help me be faster on the mountain bike. Maybe I can drink more beer, and then it doesn't, like, you know what I mean? Burn some calories, right?
Yeah.
And like that's all I used it for. I bought like a $600 single speed. You know what I mean? Like it was not anything special or anything like that. And then slowly it was like, man, I'm noticing like I recover like super fast after climbs now. Like when I'm mountain biking, and I'm like, that's kind of like, oh, this is cool, and then it's like, next thing you know, you're like, man, actually doing this more because of like what you said, it's like I can just walk out to my garage and be on my bike, and in like less than 10 minutes, I'm on the American River Trail, and I'm just like banging out miles, and it's different. It's so different than mountain biking, and like what you were saying, like you keep that watt like level at like this spot that is like impossible when you're mountain biking, like when you're mountain biking, you like spike, and it'll be like, yeah, and I'm doing like 700 watts for like 10 seconds. And then I'm doing like 150, and then I'm doing 85. And then, you know what I mean? It's like all over the place.
That's true. I mean, that's why I'd recommend too, that anybody listening that just rides trail, even if you had a trainer or could get in one low intensity ride a week that was like uninterrupted, that is such a game changer. Like when you really don't stop pedaling for a given amount of like a big given amount of time, it is so different than the stop and go you do on the bike. Even if you do a hard trail ride that's 3 hours and you have like 4,000 feet of climbing, like it's just the bikes themselves don't lend themselves to pedaling like that. And I remember too, when I was starting to feel more crunched for time, I think at this point I was riding a stump jumper. And so it was a little bit more, it was like a short travel trail bike. So all the good trail geo, still have downhill tires on it. But I put it in the high setting on the bottom bracket. And I remember just feeling like it's a little bit more capable to pedal. And when I would get crunched on time, the way I started riding trail was no stopping, essentially. And so even before rolling into a descent, at most, I would stop, take a gel, 30 seconds, put it back in my pocket, and I would start recovering on the downhills a little bit. And there was a point where I rode an XC bike for the first time, and I was like, oh, that's what XC riding is. It's like not stopping and also kind of using downhills to recover. And don't get me wrong, you can rip XC bikes. I still drop Grizzly on my XC bike. And for people who are not local, sorry, that's like one of the more technical trails in our local riding area. But that's what I started doing. And I was like, man, I'm just enjoying it more. So I think, I was kind of a psycho about time for a while. And that really did, push me this direction.
Yeah. And like I said, so, I mean, it's all like things that you do that you change things up, and maybe for a period of time it's this, or a period of time it's that. But I think at the end of the day, like I said, it's all still cycling,
Yeah, it's a really good point. And I think people should be cool with like trying different things and not being worried about, I don't know, some like dogmatic viewpoint. I mean, I've been around the most core gravity mountain bikers out there. So I get it. And I kind of had that mentality myself about Lycra. Dude, I didn't even want to clip into my mountain bike for a long time. I grew up like in the Sam Hill area. So it was flat pedals, wind metals. You don't clip in. And it took me so long to get through this. And I think what's funny, I had to change so much mentally to make my business successful that I remember telling myself at one point too, that it's okay to change. You know what I mean? It's like, it's okay to be a different person. Like just because you like this part of yourself doesn't mean it can't evolve. And for me, like when I think about trail riding and growing up at downhill, like I'm so stoked Fort Williams this weekend. I'm still a huge fan of the sport, follow all the gravity stuff. But it's just different for me. Like I don't feel the need to have to do it the same way that I did. And so, I think that just because you are changing the way you ride, it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. Like it's okay to change. I don't know.
Yeah, there was a period in time where, and I think this might have to do with like having more time or spending more time on the bike. But there was a period of time where it was like, if I rode mountain bike, like I just wanted to do like chunky, gnarly shit, and that was it.
Yeah.
And I think over the last few years, I've been spending a lot more time in the saddle. And so it's like, you can only do that so much, like, especially in your local trails. So you're like, let's say you go up to Auburn and you like do all the stuff in OHV Park and you put in 4,000 feet of climbing. But it's like, if you do that every day, you're going to get really bored of those trails.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So you start thinking of like other ways that you can do shit where you're like, okay, well, if I take my hardtail and I do Forest Hill Divide loop, and then I try to come down, something in the OHV or whatever, like you start mixing shit up, and then you find yourself like, kind of doing things like what you just said a minute ago is like, I would find myself like, I'm just going to go to Auburn. I just want to do like 2 hours. So I'm going to do this like super XC ride on my hardtail.
Mm.
And I'm just going to try not to stop. I'm just going to try to see like if I can beat the time that I did the last time, and if I have to stop to like take a leak or whatever, like it is what it is, but it's like, let's just see what the time is, and if you would have told me like years prior when I was like, oh, like it's got to be chunky, you know what I mean? Like I would be like, why would I go do that ride? That doesn't even sound fun. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, but it's realistically, it's like, no, those rides are still there. Like, okay, we're gonna go up to Tahoe on the weekend, we're gonna smash something freaking fun as hell. But me doing this like XC loop that's takes me an hour and a half or whatever, like that's getting me in the right physical shape so that when I am up at elevation and on all that nasty shit, like that I have the like the power for it.
Yeah. Yeah, there's something to be said too about getting a smaller bike on, I guess, smaller trails or smoother trails or something. It is so fun. Like riding my XC bike down Culver is a blast now. Like I absolutely love it because it's kind of challenging to ride fast still, and you move so quick. It's just a totally different experience. It's like if you ever have you ever ridden a gravel bike?
Yeah, I actually was on one earlier.
Oh, nice. Have you ridden like a good stretch of gravel on it?
Yeah.
There's not as many in our area. I guess down in Davis and Sac, there's more. But when you're on a really good fire road or gravel road on a gravel bike, it's fun. It's because it's faster, it's a little twitchier, a little sketchier, and it's this type of riding you never thought you would do, but because of the bike, it does kind of make it fun. So yeah, I think the bike does have a lot to do with it.
Yeah, and I think that and I guess I'm speaking to the MTB audience right now that because I was one of those guys that was like, dude, I'm never riding that shit. I'm a mountain biker, and
yeah, I feel you.
But like I can go out and do the big rides, like the 3, 4, 5,000 feet of climbing or whatever, and like for instance, during the winter here, it rains a lot. So I'll spend a lot of time in the last couple of years been doing Zwift during the winter. And so I came off this like Zwift training plan. Usually in the spring, I feel like I'm super strong, right? Because I'm like just kicking my ass on the Zwift and then going out and doing these bigger mountain bike rides. And my first gravel ride, like back outside, let's say I went out and just smashed. And I like busted a bunch of PRs. But the thing that blew me away the most was, I mean, I felt like I was in really good shape because I would do these crazy rides on the Zwift training plan, and next day I'd be fine again. And like I went out and did that ride. It was like a 20-mile ride, but dude, I was freaking floored the next day. Like my whole body was just like, because it was like I was instead of going and doing these like hey, 90 seconds at this watts and 1 minute at this watts, like it was basically like an hour and a half of like as max watt as I can be for the whole time. You know what I mean? It was like,
yeah,
and it blew me away. Like I was like, wow, like I forgot how much like harder it is actually on your body to do those kind of rides.
Yeah, that's like if you guys ever watch XC. Have you ever watched XC racing?
No,
Like the
not
XC,
really.
dude. Watch it, and knowing what you know now after that experience, the stuff that they ride and how fast they actually descend on these bikes, and they put like 100 mil stems on these things. It's
Oh yeah.
freaking bonkers. Like to do, it's like you do a max sprint and then you drop into a sketchy rock garden on a bike that is like not built for it. It's
I've
like gives
definitely
you a whole
seen
new
some of that.
appreciation.
Yeah, I've definitely seen some of that. I know I was watching the XC guys in the Olympics the one year, and I was just like, dude, those guys are like freaking screaming through that trail. And it's not like it's like XC, I think at least for somebody my age, like had this like super chill kind of like almost like in my mind, it's like a gravel ride on single track. But you look at what the XC like air quote XC races are now, like they're doing some pretty like challenging technical shit. You know what I mean? It's not just like some smooth trail that just is on dirt, you know?
No, not at all. And those dudes can really ride.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, there's definitely big props to all those guys. And like I never really knew what watts were until I started doing like a trainer. And once you understand like, oh, this is how many watts I'm putting out and this is how bad it fucking sucks. Like, and then you see what those guys are doing where they're like, you know, like 4 watts per kilogram or something, or 5. And you're like, holy shit, dude, those guys are just fucking dropping power, man.
Yeah.
You know, like
it's amazing. It's so insane to see the power profiles after these races. And I mean, I'm thinking of the Giro d'Italia starting tomorrow for all the roadies. It's like the Grand Tour season. And so you'll see what these people do. It's insane. But then you think, you're like, oh, well, if I literally dedicated my life to this and had already been doing that for the last 10 years, maybe that is possible, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I remember when I first started doing the trainer, and let's just say like the very first time I took an FTP test, I think my FTP was like 215 or something like that. Right. And I remember thinking like, if I was at like 1.5 watts per kilogram, is that right? Something like that. Like, I remember thinking, man, this is pretty hard. And I remember seeing like guys that were at 2 and thinking, man, that's fucking crazy. And then I remember being at 2, and then it's like looking at 3, and that, like now I'm at 3 and over 3 at points. And it's like looking at guys that are doing 5 and 6. And I'm like, what the fuck, man? Like I'm fucking pushing my ass off in here. And it's like, it's crazy that people can put down that kind of power, man. It's just nuts.
It took me a while to understand how that was possible, especially you look at like coming from a strength training perspective, you always think of muscle being this like prime thing that is necessary for moving weight. And so you look at these guys and you're like, how are they so skinny and able to hold this amount of power and this amount of force? So the things that change in your blood and your physiology is just insane. So it's
I think, and I don't have any kind of like scientific proof for this or anything. You'll probably be able to cite something, but I think that certain people's body types are like predispositioned for like different kind of athleticism. So like,
that's fair to say.
Like for me, like my heart rate doesn't get really high. So like endurance wise, like I'm always the guy that can be like, dude, I'll ride forever. I just won't do it fast. You know what I mean? Where it's like, I know other guys that are like, they can freaking go out and just smash, but after like an hour and a half or 2 hours, they're done. You know? And like I have a buddy like that like, I don't know, he doesn't seem like he sweats very much. So like for him, like I think his body's just not like depleting like all that salt and stuff like that. So like he doesn't have to like hydrate as much, or I don't know what the fuck it is, dude, but that guy can like he's got advantages, you know what I mean? It's like it's very interesting.
I always think of that with swimmers, because you see these swimmers and obviously they're not wearing that much, so you can see their bodies, and you think, okay, did their bodies get like that because they've been swimming their whole life, or were they predisposed to that, having that body type, and that's why they've made it to this level of swimming? And so there's an argument for both, but a lot of people lean towards the fact that, okay, they all look the same because they have the body type and they leaned into the sport, and that's why they're the best in the world. And I think that is true to an extent. I mean, most cyclists are smaller people in general, but not everybody. I mean, Matt Beers is South African marathon national champion, just won Cape Epic for the 3rd time. He just won the Belgian waffle ride, which is almost a full-on road race. It's like they call it an unroad race. It's got single track segments, but basically this dude is like 190 pounds. He's not a
He's a
small
big
dude.
guy. Yeah,
But he
that's a big
puts
dude.
out, I mean, his FTP is 480 watts.
Yeah.
And so knowing like FTPs, like that's just almost hard to even freaking imagine. So
yeah,
it's not like it has to be that way, but I think that people tend to lean toward their advantages. And so, if you have the body type for a specific sport, if you end up liking it a little bit, it's probably a lot easier to get into,
Yeah. That's crazy. 480?
Yeah.
What the fuck?
Yeah.
Dude, I think the last
really
time I took a test, I was at like 250 something. I just finished like a 6-week program, so I need to retest and see where I'm at. I'm guessing I'm probably in like 260, maybe if I'm lucky 270, but like I think it would be rad to be around 300. That's like kind of a goal for me, but
yeah,
that's
an awesome goal.
But I mean, that's fucking, it's work, dude. It is work to get strong like that. I never, like, when I first started like really trying to change my endurance or whatever, I work out or whatever, but I was like, I'm just gonna go ride a shit ton of bike. You know what I mean? And I did that, and I was like riding hours and hours all the time. And that year that I started doing Zwift, like I said, my first test was like a 220 or something like that, and it was like, dude, I was riding like 4,000 or 5,000 foot rides, but my FTP was only a 220, and it was like to go through a 6-week program and like actually be doing stuff that makes you stronger like that way. I never did anything like that before on the bike. Like, bike was always fun. And that freaking training program was like a pain cave.
Yeah. Training versus riding definitely is kind of different. And you want to respect it that way, but at the same time, you can only ride undisciplined, or undisciplined is like a bad term, because it's riding your bike. But if you're not on a training plan, you are going to hit a plateau at a point where it's like, all right, you just doing your thing the way you're doing it. Maybe you have some high intensity, some low intensity. Maybe you ride a lot in the middle. Whatever it is, like, you're hitting that bar. And if you want to push through that level, you're going to have to actually get a little bit more specific and a little bit more intentional with the type of riding you're doing. It's almost like the same. It's like doing drills in sports. It's like, okay, or if let's just say you're a moto guy. I'm sure most guys that listen to your podcast follow moto a little bit. So it's like, okay, cool, you're really good through whoops. Well, your start sucks, so it doesn't really matter. So they just drill their start, and you have to do the same thing with your energy systems when you're training. So if you have really short high power, and it's not that you don't want to work on that at all and hone it, but maybe that's not the thing that's holding you back, and you do need to work on the base a little bit. And so you have to train those things separately. And there's a point where it's like, okay, if I do really want to keep getting faster, if I want to hit 300 watts for your FTP or something, you might have to get a little bit more intentional,
Yeah. So tying that into your training, so there's like, okay, you can do so much training on the bike, and that's only going to get you so far as well. Then how did you start then becoming like, what exercises in the gym really change things? Like, how did you start formulating that, just from like being a cyclist yourself, or like what was it that helped you like kind of like curate these routines that you have on your website?
Well, when I was trail riding, I was also going out and kind of just riding as hard as I could at any given time. And I was strength training 3 days a week, but I was starting to just feel too tired. Like, I didn't feel like I was recovering. I would do heavy deadlifts, and then my ride would suck the next day. I still wouldn't go easy on my ride. So then I'd get back to my next gym session, and then I didn't feel good either. So I felt like, So I felt like I was overdoing it, but I also knew there was so much progress that I could potentially make. And so I realized that I was not recovering well enough for that amount of workload, and I needed to get a little bit more strategic. And a big thing was trying to make sure I controlled the volume of things I was doing in the gym. You know, like I'll give you an example. Like a lot of cyclists or mountain bikers, a lot of, I would say, outdoorsy people in general tend to enjoy leg workouts more than the average Joe.
Mhm.
And I was definitely one of these guys that I just wanted to build the most savage leg workouts, and I wanted to do back squats, or actually, let me give you a better example of something I would do. So it'd be like some progressive warm up, a lot of activation and mobility, but then it'd be like, all right, heavy deadlifts, that's going to be the main thing. And then after that, I'm going to do walking lunges for like a quarter mile or something like that. Or I'm
Mhm.
going to do this insane amount of box jumps, just absolutely burn my legs out. And then once
Yeah.
those are cooked, then I'm doing calf raises, and then I'm going to go to smaller muscle groups. And so, you know, you feel good in the moment doing it. And you're like, I want stronger legs for the bike. So I'm destroying them now. This makes sense. Like I'm doing a
Mhm.
good thing. But there's a
Mhm.
point where you just can't recover from it and go ride. So then it was like, all right, how much can I train my legs and still get the benefits on the bike? How much can I do the rest of my workouts and not feel like it's actually slowing my rides down? And
Yeah.
that's when focusing on the volume of certain movements became really important. And the gym I was working for at the time was called Equinox, and they have insane education. And one of the pieces, like, or I would say it's more so one of the pillars of their programming was the 7 effective movements, which it's like, this is how you create a balanced program. And for me, it was a guideline to how little I could do in the gym and get benefit
Yeah.
without burning myself out. So the movements were basically covering your whole body. And
Mhm.
it was a knee dominant movement, like a step up or a lunge, a hip
Mhm.
dominant movement, like a squat or a deadlift. You had your core. So there's a variety of things you could do for your core, but just think a plank or a sit up variation.
Yeah.
It could even be like a back extension. And then you have a horizontal push, like a push up, a horizontal pull. So that would be a rowing
Mhm.
movement. And then you have a vertical push, shoulder press, or a vertical pull, like a pull up. And so
Mhm.
that built a lot of the framework behind a lot of the programming that I do now. And I still lean into that, making sure that there's at least one of those movements throughout a given week of programming. And
Mhm.
depending on the riding style, depending on the person, you can add on more of those movements. And that's where kind of specificity comes in. But that
Yeah.
laid a lot of groundwork for figuring out, okay, it almost sounds weird to say it, but it's like, what's the minimum I can do
Yeah.
and get results? And
Yeah.
then from there, it's like, well, for the person that's riding 20 hours a week or 4 days a week, 5 days a week,
Mhm.
you know, they probably want to stick with a smaller workload in the gym. Whereas the
Yeah.
person who's riding 2 days a week could handle a third or fourth day in the
Yeah.
gym. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so, but then also it's like, what's the boundary? Because you
Yeah.
can't keep, there's got to be some point where you're like, listen, you just can't do less than this and expect
Yeah.
progress.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's also probably a boundary the other direction that's a little bit more individual, where it's like, okay, you do this amount of riding, you probably don't need to add that third day. You don't probably don't need to add a fourth day. So,
Yeah.
and a lot of that came with the experience of working with more people. You know, through my website and app, there's a really high volume of people that I talk to, and so I get to see what they're doing, and I have this questionnaire that they fill out, and it gives me a good idea of what will work for them, and then follow up conversations
Yeah.
as far as you know, what's actually getting them the benefit, you know. So
Yeah. Yeah.
it's been pretty cool.
Right on,
Yeah.
man. Yeah, I've definitely had to like in the past I used to ride like 2 days a week. And I that was like my life, you know, like a midweek ride and a weekend ride, you know.
Yeah.
And after my kids grew up and got out of the house and stuff, it's like I ride probably 5 days a week, if not 6 days a week sometimes, you know. And so I definitely had to learn how to like cater those rides. And then when you start acting like doing workouts too, then it's like, okay, I and I don't know if it's, you know, right or not, but like I don't do as much leg stuff in the gym. I try to do a lot more like core and just like my upper body in the gym, because I feel like my legs are just getting like blasted all the time from all the riding that I'm,
Yeah.
you know. But I mean, I add, there is some leg stuff in there, but it's definitely like not the focus for me, because I feel like if I do too much in the gym, then like what you said, then I'm worthless on the trail, you know. And I don't want it
Yeah.
to be that way. I want to like have fun riding bikes. So
But I
but
will say, if I got to interject there, there is
yeah.
that boundary. So for you, if you're like, okay, I'm going to spend the majority of my time on my core, my upper body, I would just say at least hit one leg movement each strength session, and split your strength. And that's probably enough. But to even keep activation, like for instance, if you feel like, okay, my legs don't really need to be stronger, but you do want to you want to maintain what you have at least. And the reality is that, for your glutes, for example, you get a little glute activation on the bike if you're pedaling perfectly, but it's a quad dominant movement. You do get hamstring engagement. Everyone wants to say, no, you're supposed to use, you're supposed to, but it's knee extension. Knee extension is just the prime mover is going to be your quadriceps. So then for the most part, I say these things and then there's like always these like caveats, but you want to make sure that your posterior chain, for example, is getting worked. So for you to just be like, all right, I'm going to keep it cool with my legs, but I'm going to make sure at least once a week I'm hitting my hamstrings. Once a week I'm hitting my glutes. Maybe doing one step up variation, 3 sets of 10, cut it off. And you're probably going to maintain at least,
Yeah. And those are similar things that I do. Like I said, like there's lunges that I do, or like things that like with the kettlebell where you're like going into a squat and then up to, like, I don't know what you call it. I don't know what the exercises are called, but like, where you're like squatting, kind of throwing it up over your shoulders and then kind of back down to a squat. You know what I mean?
Swing?
Yeah, I guess so.
I think I need to teach you how to do kettlebell swings.
Yeah, there's a bunch of shit you need to teach me, man. But anyways, like,
all right, we're gonna do that. That's literally my favorite workout. So I'd love to teach you. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know a whole lot of kettlebell stuff. I just been like kind of looking at this poster and figuring it out along the way. So it's like, but they're fun. They're like more on the fun side of exercises. Because it's kind of like, at least most of the exercises that I've done with them, you feel like you're activating a lot of things all at once. And like, that to me is like, oh, this is cool because I'm doing this one instead of like a bench press. You're like, oh, I'm just like working my chest, maybe my tries a little bit. You know what I mean? But like when you're fucking around with those kettlebells, you're like, and everything sucks right now.
Yeah, 100%. And the first rule about training with kettlebells, you can't call them kettleballs. Yeah, you got to call it a kettlebell. That's going to give it away right away. So kettlebell, I'm going to teach you how to do a swing. You'll be stoked.
Sweet.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
So, kind of back to the beginning, you find yourself riding down this road on this road ride that you've gotten yourself there. Like, how did that day play out? How do you remember
it? Well, I remember everything. No head injury is a huge blessing, but it's also crazy because you experience a lot of trauma by remembering everything. But man, it was a very, very average day. I'd actually recorded a podcast for my podcast and had just gone out in the middle of the day for 2 hours, mostly flat roads, zone 2 ride. And I actually went up to a lot of the roads that the riders around here go to get away from cars. It's kind of the ironic thing about this. And yeah, it's just a nice spring feeling day. About as average as it gets, honestly.
So then what happened? You're like crossing some road and like, or some guys just passing you from behind, or like how did the accident happen?
Yeah. So I rolled up to a 4-way stop. And this is up in Loomis on the corner of Wise and Crosby Herald, if anybody knows the intersection. And my plan was to make a left-hand turn to go north on Crosby Herald. And so when I approached the intersection, there's some shrubs, there's some like raised property, but it's mostly visible. And so I saw a car coming from the left, which was the direction that I was going to turn. And I just assumed that they were going to stop because we're coming up to a 4-way stop sign.
Right.
And then I look straight. So in my head, I'm like, okay, car's coming from the left. They're stopping. I look straight, clear. I look right, clear. And at this point, I checked up going into the intersection because I'm making the turn. But I didn't come to a complete stop. And so by the time I rolled into the intersection, I look left again. And what I expect to see is a car stopped at the stop sign. But I realized in a split second that I'm getting hit. And so it really happened that fast. And to give people an idea, the car was estimated at going 60 miles an hour from eyewitnesses and from some other things after the fact. And I hit the front. I was going left. The car was coming from my left and crossing, so left to right in front of me. And I hit the front passenger side of the car. And so I was like barely in the intersection, but this dude was driving so fast that it was just like snap of the fingers, and basically look left and realize I'm about to get hit. And the only thing I could think of doing was just jumping as high as I could. And it was crazy, man. I felt like a cat, like a scared cat, almost like a cartoon where they jump in the air and their back arches up. Dude, I just remember pushing off my handlebars, pushing through my pedals, and just jumping as high as I could. And then the car hit my lower body, and I just flung up in the air and started cartwheeling so fast that I think that actually blacked me out. So it's crazy because I got a CT scan and my brain's okay. There's no head injury. I broke my helmet in 2 places though. And the only thing I don't remember was hitting the ground after I got flung up in the air. And part of me thinks it's because of that, like the G forces of just being like spun.
Yeah.
And so I just basically cartwheeled. And then I remember opening my eyes and rolling onto my back and seeing a big truck driving at me. And so I tried to crawl out of the road. And as I rolled more onto my left to crawl out of the road, I felt my femur move in my leg, and just the center of my thigh just like rolled over on itself. Like it's hard to describe even what it looked like, but it's just like the whole thing just rolled like this.
Yeah, it didn't move the way it should be.
No. And it was just the most excruciating pain I've ever experienced. I can't even describe it. And I've had a lot of injuries too. I broke my collarbone, wrist, ribs, concussions, torn ACL. I've had legit injuries, but this was on such another level that it was indescribable. I remember at the time thinking like, this is indescribable. And so I was trying to crawl out of the road, but it hurt too bad. And so I just laid on my back and just started waving my arms for the car to see me so I didn't get ran over. Thankfully, they stopped and got out of their car, and I could tell they were running up to me to help me. And that's when I just put my head back on the ground and started feeling the pain in my hip. And I just reached down to grab it or hold it. And it was really sharp.
Yeah.
It just felt like it felt like a rock was pushing into my palm, but it was my pelvis. So I had a open pelvis fracture, and the whole part of like the top corner of my ilium, it's like the upper outside of your pelvis, just completely blew off, and it was an open fracture. So the bottom of the pelvis was just sticking out. So when that was pushing into my palm, and I pulled my hand up to my face to just see what was going on, and it was just covered in blood. And honestly, I've been doing a lot of therapy, but that was the moment where I was like, I think I'm going to die because there's so much blood. And I actually posted a photo, and you can see the trail. If you look down by my leg on the photo of the accident I'm talking about, where I describe it, you see like a trail of blood where I was crawling.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
And so thankfully, the couple that got out started helping me. I didn't have my cell phone, which was insane. I haven't left for a ride without my cell phone, at least since my kids have been born, like 5 years.
Yeah.
And I think this part's significant because it was so unlikely that I'd forget my phone, but I was completely conscious. And when Lisa, the lady who got out of the truck, asked me for my phone, I told her I didn't have it. And I knew that because right before I went out to get some content on my ride, like that's part of the reason I bring my phone too. And I remember thinking, oh, dude, I left it. That's crazy. But I was kind of at my turnaround point anyways. So it was just like, all right, I just got to ride home anyways.
Yeah.
But the reason I think it's significant is because I was able to tell her my wife's name and phone number. And for whatever reason, my wife actually picked up a random number, which again,
Yeah.
she doesn't pick up my calls. So it was
Right.
like random. And she got that news, which was horrible. But she told me that because I was able to give Lisa my phone number, she knew my
Mhm.
brain was okay. And I was like coherent enough that
Yeah.
at least my brain was okay. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
and
100%.
that gave her, she told me that that's the thing that like got her through that drive to the hospital. Um,
Because
and so
you gave the phone number. I'm sorry. I don't want to make
yeah,
you
no, it's okay.
relive it.
One second, I'm just gonna grab a little water.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's just interesting. I think how God works, because it's like this horrible thing happened, and you think how could this be? How could this become something good for one?
Hmm.
And for two, it's just finding people's limits. And I think that little piece of the story was to help my wife through it, because she
Hmm.
needed that just to get there. So
Yeah.
I think that part was really interesting. But basically, from the time I got hit to now has just been a complete miracle, man, because for one, I'm on roads that, like I told you before, we usually ride these roads to get away from cars. And
Yeah.
then I happen to have 4 people on the scene within like 90 seconds.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there was actually another car that I didn't see. They were just out of my field of vision that basically got it was an eyewitness to the whole thing. The driver who hit me had stopped, gotten out of his car, looked, and then got back in and drove away. And so by doing that, we got like a full profile on the driver, which was great. But also he left me there to die. And
Yeah.
so if these other people wouldn't have been there, and one person in particular was this off-duty registered nurse who I remember seeing her just walk up to me, and she took her sweatshirt off and just stuffed it in my hips.
She
And just, I
went to work.
remember, yeah, I just
Yeah.
remember feeling that thing just getting pushed into my hip, and the amount of pressure she put on it was insane.
Yeah.
And it's those little things where I'm like, well, you know, someone with medical training would only know to do that. And
Dude,
so,
it's so weird how shit like that happens, man.
yeah,
Like, 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 how are all these things aligned the way that they're aligned? I had an experience in my life, to make it a really, really short story. I got struck by lightning and was like, basically had that
really,
moment. Yeah. Had that moment where I was like, I'm fucking dying right now. Right. And this is
dude,
it,
no way.
so and it just so happened to be that, like, when that happened, that this was when I was in the military, that the fire department for the airfield that we were guarding was like driving down the runway, and they were like, I don't know, 150 yards away from me, like where this happened. And like, it's the same kind of situation of what you're talking about. Like, these guys, like, they said that like all the hair on their body just stood up and laid down. And then they're like, well, we're going up in this tower. We're going to see these dudes dead for sure. Like, they're not
Yeah,
even thinking, and it's like, but it's that same thing. It's like, what's the fucking odds? Like, I was out there on guard for
dude.
almost a year. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
there was never a fire department riding down the fucking runway.
yeah,
So like,
right.
it's just weird how that shit happens,
What did
man.
they have to do to help you after that? Like, what was you?
Basically nothing.
Yeah,
To make a really long story short, I mean, we could talk about it another time. I know you're pressed for time, but like, yeah, basically, there's no like fucking rule book of what you do when somebody gets hit with a fucking bunch of electricity like
right.
that.
That's so,
So,
dude. That is insane. I mean,
yeah,
that's kind of how it's been with me too. There's been all these protocols of trying to get active and whatever, but at the end of the day, it's like no one has really gone through exactly what I went through,
yeah,
And so you just have to play it by ear and really try and listen to your body. And I'm grateful that the network I have with people, because I have friends who are chiropractors and physical therapists and osteopaths and massage therapists. And I can I can talk to all these people about what I'm going through, and along with my doctors and my surgeons. And so it's been really helpful.
Well, I think
Because,
you also
you know,
have such a great knowledge of the human body and how to work it. Like, I just remember being
yeah,
one of those people that was very inspired by you. It's like, here you are, you can't even fucking stand up, and you're like doing X, Y, and Z exercises to like. It's
yeah.
like, Jesus Christ, man, just sit on the couch for a little bit.
No. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh. Yeah, I think the first thing I started messing with a band and stretching a little bit and doing some upper back activation. So I was in the hospital for 9 days. And it was like 5 days ICU, 4 days regular hospital. When I got out, I stayed at my parents for a couple of days just because I didn't want to come home to my kids. I didn't really
yeah,
know how it was going to be.
yeah.
And so thankfully I had that option. And I think it was just about the 2 week mark where I started moving the band a little bit, getting my shoulder blades woken up, getting my back woken up. And then pretty shortly after, I just started laying on the incline bench, and I'd have someone hand me like 20-pound dumbbells.
Yeah,
And, if you're experienced in strength training, benching 20-pound dumbbells, it's not even a warm up for
yeah.
most people. But that's all I could do because essentially, I mean, I guess we didn't really go down the injury list, but my whole left leg was, to say that I just couldn't move, it's like an understatement because there was so much pain. But I I'd broken my fibula all the way through. That didn't need surgery, thankfully. That's like the little bone on the outside of your lower leg.
Mm-hmm.
But I really bad break of the femur, a lot of fragments. I have a full titanium rod all the way through. My pelvis was the break I described. They were able to put everything back together. Thankfully, all the bone that came off was like still in the muscle that had come off with it, and it like flapped open and then like flapped back and held it. And so I have a bunch of plates and screws, really big screws in my pelvis. And then I had torn my colon, thankfully not all the way through, but I had to do an X-lap surgery. So they went through the front of my stomach and just pulled my abs apart. And I also had a collapsed lung. So there was like all these things connected, especially from my lower, like my core down.
Mm-hmm.
So even straining too heavy on a bench press that doesn't use your core very much still was risky. So I
Yeah.
was really proud of not overdoing it, but still doing everything I literally could. So yeah, I would just get handed 20-pound dumbbells and just press them until I got tired. I would
I
just
feel like,
do any curl variation, anything
was
I could
it
do.
was it like, this is something I have control of?
To be honest, no. Dude, I love the workout.
Yeah.
It just
Yeah.
felt good. I was just
Yeah.
like, thank God I can get some blood flow going. This feels
This is do
good.
something.
This is what I want to do.
Yeah.
So I want to do it. And I
Yeah.
know that the benefits of initially when I was first moving, it was all about blood flow. It's like the more blood
Yeah.
flow, the better, period.
Yeah. Yeah.
As
It's
long
good
as I'm
to
not
heal.
hurting myself.
Yeah.
But to me, it just felt empowering, and maybe it
Yeah.
was like a control thing. But at the
Yeah.
same time, I still notice this, it's very demoralizing to get back as soon as you can because you're so weak. I
Yeah.
was deadlifting a 12-kilo kettlebell. It's like 25-pound kettlebell, and it was hard. And this
Yeah.
was a week ago, and we were filming actually for the documentary we're doing on this, and I just broke down crying. And I can't even tell you the amount of crying I've had to do in the last few months, but sometimes it's been during strength workouts. Like I remember one workout, I was just doing calf raises and just bawling my eyes out. And I just
Yeah.
like kept doing calf raises because I was like, this is all I can do right now.
Yeah.
And it's just like the first time I got on my mountain bike. So I found some like 135 mil cranks because it's taken a while to get my knee flexion back. We had it immobilized for almost 6 weeks. And so it's taken a while to get it back. And I was like, all right, short cranks, get on the mountain bike, start moving. Again, blood flow. I just want to get out and ride. I had some flat plastic pedals on with reflectors. And I remember not being able to make it this one little hill, which I almost didn't even know it was a hill previously. This is just a hill out in Folsom Lake.
Right. Right. Right.
And I couldn't make it up. And I just lost it. And so that's the thing, is that you're so grateful to move again. But I think when you're doing really as much as you can, you find your limit so often. It's like very humbling. Like it's like
Yeah.
every single day I've done a workout or a ride since this has happened, I hit the limit of like, I cannot do this. And by the way, I wouldn't have even warmed up with that. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like the
Yeah. Yeah.
watts that are raising my heart rate now on my bike, it's it's like not even a warm what would have been a warm up, you know? So it's like,
Yeah.
okay, on one hand, I'm so grateful I'm in this position of recovery, but it's also this crazy demoralizing thing. So it's been the mental side of it's been crazy. You know,
Yeah.
you have so many different thoughts. So I'm
Yeah.
just grateful for that support system. And dude, the therapy, the trauma therapy I've been through has been so
Yeah.
legit. I mean,
Yeah.
it took me for a while to comfortably say that I had PTSD from this because I always
Yeah.
felt like, no, that's for military. That's like
Yeah.
that's for first responders. That's for,
Yeah.
people who are in battle. But like, I was
Dude, you
even
were in a
talking,
battle, you know?
yeah,
You were fighting for
yeah.
your life, man.
Well,
So,
my
like
detective, he actually, it's crazy, he used to work with my dad. My dad's retired CHP, and he looked at me, he's like, "Bro, if I told you about what happened to you and just made it a different setting and it was a war setting, you would think it's the craziest thing you've ever heard." And he's
right.
like, "It's just a different setting." He's like, But the same thing happened." And I think
Yeah.
the fact that it was so fast, it was just, and the
Yeah.
fact that I remember it and felt the whole thing. I mean, I
Yeah.
couldn't even get pain meds till I got to the hospital 45
Yeah.
minutes later. So
Yeah.
it's like, there was a lot to kind of own, and I don't know. I'm just grateful for all these resources, man, because there's a
Yeah.
lot of people that want to help, and so I'm really trying to take advantage of it.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you what, man, everything that I've seen you do so far is it looks like you are taking advantage of it, and it looks like you're you're showing people how you can overcome, and I think that's what's so inspiring is that people are like, hey, look, this can happen, and you can come out of it with a positive attitude and like and keep charging and like keep being a great person, and that's awesome, dude.
Dude,
Um,
thank you. That means a
yeah,
lot, and you've had a huge hand in that too. I mean,
yeah,
you like everybody that was at that fundraiser, for example. Ah, it's
yeah,
so cool. So yeah,
yeah,
I'm really grateful for you guys taking the time to do that, and getting the word around even when I couldn't talk about it. It's cool.
yeah, man. Honestly, I think that I I'm sure I can speak for everybody else. All of us felt like we weren't really doing enough or much, and but I think collectively it was an amazing thing that we all did. And I think at the
It
end of the
was.
day, I
Yeah.
think I think at the end of the day though, you're worth it, you know.
Thank
So
you. I
yeah,
really
dude.
appreciate that.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah,
thanks.
man.
And everybody really is. I think that's the crazy thing that it's one of the realizations I've had is being in the hospital and you see how many people are in the hospital, and these beds are full like all the time,
Yeah,
and there's always people in need like this. And you can't, there was a while where I was really dwelling on a lot of heavy things because I was so overwhelmed with all these like new thoughts and
yeah,
perspectives. And so it's like you can't live in fear. You can't just sulk and focus on things that are sad because there's plenty of that to do.
yeah,
But it has sparked something in me that wasn't there before about wanting to actually help people in need.
yeah,
And it's not that I haven't felt that way in the past, but I have been guilty of being the busy guy. And that's kind of the excuse for not
yeah,
being more involved or being
yeah.
more hands on with individuals or something.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I really want to change that going forward, you know?
Right on, man.
Yeah.
Dude, I could sit here and talk to you all day long, man. Honestly, like you're a fun person to talk to, and I always like your perspective on things. And but I know you also have some things to do today, so I appreciate you sitting down and chatting with me today, man.
Dude, thank you. And I'm sorry to have to cut it short.
Oh, dude,
Um,
man.
but
Yes.
the boys have been testing my wife, so I'm trying to give her a little bit more time to herself.
Yeah.
I took them up to that to the brewery last night for the MTB NorCal thing.
Oh yeah.
Are you going to be out at the Dirt Days tomorrow?
Yeah, I wanted to mention that. Thanks for bringing that up.
Okay,
Definitely
cool.
going out to Dirt Days tomorrow, rain or shine. So if you guys are thinking about maybe not going because you're not going to be able to ride, who cares, man? Come up there and check it out. Because honestly, what those guys do, it's a fundraiser just to put money back into our trails, and they're a good, solid group of people. Obviously, they help pull everything together for Derek, and those of you that may not be aware, as everything was all said and done, it was, I think, around $75,000 that they raised in a matter of a week or so for keeping this guy going. So that was amazing. So let's go up there and support him, regardless of whether or not we can ride bikes. We can definitely go up there and drink some beers and talk about bikes. So
yeah, definitely. Did you check the forecast? Is it just supposed to rain in the morning?
It's like, I don't
off and
trust the
on?
weatherman at all, dude.
Yeah.
What I mean?
It's kind of been like that this year, where
Yeah.
it's changes so much. Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, it looks like it's in the morning, but like, I don't know, man. Basically, I'm gonna get up, I'm gonna go, and we're gonna see what happens.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Same.
So
That's
I
cool.
mean, last year it was pouring something fierce, and I was up there, and we still had a good time. So whatever.
Cool.
Man. It is what it is.
Cool.
Well, thanks again, man. Honestly, if you guys aren't familiar with Derek's website, Dialed Health, there's a link in Show More or in the podcast notes. Go over there, take a look at it. You can also look Dialed Health up or Derek Teel on Instagram. You can find him over there. Thanks for listening, everybody. Those of you guys that are sponsors on Patreon or YouTube members, thanks a lot. You guys really keep this thing going. I'm going to wrap this up, but before I do, I want you to remember one thing. It only takes a bike to be a biker. Get out and be one.